When it comes to the head, sew the brown part and the white part together first, but leave a little section open so that way you can put the polyfill in with the opening. The rest of the items you can just stuff with the polyfill now, but the head is the one that you want to sew together first and then stuff it. So when sewing the two parts of the head together, I like to line up the areas where we connected each row, so that way if they are visible we can easily hide it by connecting them together and then putting the body, attaching it around this area. So thread your needle. I'm using a plastic needle because it's more bendy. It will be a lot easier with the needle that can bend easier, because last time when I used the regular needle it took a long time and it was a little painful, honestly. So thread the plastic needle, and then once your needle is threaded, we're going to go put our needle into the stitch where the tail is sticking out of and pull through all the way. Now for sewing the rest of the head, go through the brown, go up, and then we're gonna go, you don't want to sew these little scallops, you only want to sew the 12th row of the single crochets. So I'm gonna go under and tighten it. Tighten it so that way you can barely see the white where the brown is. Then here I'm gonna go into the next stitch, go down, and then go into the next brown stitch and pull all the way, and just continue doing so for the rest of the head, and make sure you leave an opening so that way you can put the polyfill in here. Now that it's all sewed together and you have this gap in the back, lightly stuff it with the polyfill because we still want to be able to add the safety eyes. You can add it before if you want. I prefer to see how it's shaping so far, and then I like to place my eyes where I think it'll look good. So grab your polyfill and start filling it up. Don't fill it up all the way though, because we're still going to add the safety eyes. I have it lightly stuffed now. I'm adding the eyes in between, so going down. So I'm counting this as row 1, 2, 3, 4. So in between rows 3 and 4, I have inserted the eyes. I have a total of 8 stitches in between them, and I have them right across from where the back side is. You can obviously change it if you want, if you have a different way you want to put it, if you want to put it closer or further away, that's completely up to you. So once you have them set in the location you want, you can add this. And then with my hand, I'm going to connect the hole and then the line from the safety. Let there on together. I'm gonna move on to the next one. Add the nose and the blush now, and then I'm gonna finish stuffing his head. So grab the tan Bernat velvet yarn, so the thin one, and then grab your threading needle and then thread it. And when you thread this one, you want both ends to have the same amount of yarn. Once you get a good amount for both sides, just cut it and then make sure it is centered perfectly. And I'm going to insert it into the 5th row down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then make sure there's 3 stitches on each side from the eye. So 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. So in between these 3 right here, I am going to put my needle through 3 stitches, the 3 middle stitches. So go ahead and pull it through all the way. Leave some out so that way we can tie it, so that way we can secure it later on. Go again into this loop that you just went from and tighten. And then I'm gonna go around one more time.
Same way. And tighten it.
And now with the needle, I'm gonna go around these that we just made. So go in and insert your hook, insert your needle, over and over. So you're gonna do that until you basically can't anymore. So this is my last one. I'm making sure it's on the very end. And then I'm gonna tie this end and this end just once. And then I'm gonna cut this side and then tuck these inside of the head. Now that the nose is all done, I'm going to add the cheeks, the blush. So I'm gonna grab the pink yarn. I don't know, his head looks weird right now. He's not fully stuffed, so then I'm gonna thread my needle. And then have a medium length and then cut it. And then do the blush right under the eyes. So for the blush, I'm gonna go 2 rows under the eye. And go through 3 stitches. And pull. And then go through the same way of the 3 stitches. Then I'm going to cut this part. And then after we cut it, just tie the 2 ends once. And then tuck it in. And then go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. I went ahead and finished stuffing the head. I'm still working on the back of stuffing it, and there's some areas that still need more. But once you are done stuffing it, close this off and then go around one more time sewing it. So sew this part, and then once this part is closed, sew everything all over again just to make sure that it's super secure. And just the head by itself took almost an entire bag of polyfill, so you're going to need another bag for the body and then all the other parts. Now you can stuff the horn and then add it to the head. So we're just going to stuff them. So I counted 4 stitches away from the eyes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I went straight up and then got this placement, and I like how it is here, so I'm gonna do the same thing here. So count 4, go straight up from the 4, make sure they start on the same row and then finish on the same row too when you sew them together. So thread your needle. So you're going to start sewing from up to down, since the thread is where the curve is. So you want to go under the white and make sure it's all the way through, and just keep sewing. And then when you're done, just remove the needle and then tuck in the tail. And then do the same thing to the other horn. When you're done with the horns, you're going to add the ears. So thread your needle. And then we're going to put the ears right underneath where the horn was. The needle through. Make sure you are not attaching to the scallops, you're attaching to the single crochets up here, and just sew it on. And when you're sewing, don't go into the same stitch because then you'll undo your work. So go into a different stitch, back down, and then go through the ear, and just continue doing that several times. And then just tuck in the rest of the tail into the head. And then do the same thing for the other side, for the other ear. And then we will work on the body right after. So for the body, just go ahead and start stuffing it with the polyfill. Now that it's all stuffed, we're going to attach it to the back side of the head, keeping this at the bottom and then attaching it, making sure that the top of the body stays under the scallops. So just thread your needle and then start sewing from the bottom. My camera died and I didn't realize it until it was too late. One thing that I showed is that you can put, like, you can attach yarn from the head to the body just to like make sure you have it in place where you want it to be while you sew it around. So that is something that helped me while doing this, to make sure I had it in the exact spot that I wanted it to be when I sewed it. The next part we're going to sew onto Appa is the belly. So just thread your needle Then flip Appa upside down. And sorry, I can't get a better angle of this. I can't get my tripod any higher. I'm gonna make sure that the edges line up on the same row on the head. Here, it's going to go on the same row right here. So go around that row, or you can just count from the middle and make sure that on this side it's on the same row as well. And then you can sew this side and this side in as placeholders for now, so that way it's easier to sew straight across and make sure that it's not crooked or anything. So I'm going to get scrap yarn, and I'm going to connect this to row 9 on both sides of row 9. So this is my row 9. I'm going to put my hook. You can get any hook for this, it's just the closest one to me. Insert it through the white that's right next to the row 9, and then go through the row 9 as well. Then I'm going to grab the green yarn and bring it through like so, and then I'm going to grab this end of the green yarn and pull it through the loop that I just made, and then just tighten it. This is going to be used as the placeholder to make sure I have it in line, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And then before I start sewing, I'm just going to tuck in all these ends so that they're on the inside of the belly, because once I sew this, it's not really going to come out. Unless you want to weave it in, that's up to you, but you're going to sew this very securely. And sew around at least 2 times to make sure it's extra secure. Once you have the belly sewed on, just stuff the legs with the polyfill. And then you're going to sew across before you attach it. And then after you sew across, you're going to attach it right in between this area. So where the brown and the white meet. And you're going to sew it on 4 rows. So for the first leg, I'm sewing it for these first 4 rows. Then I'm skipping 3 rows, and then this leg is going to be these 4 rows. Skip 3, and then this one is going to be the next 4 rows. And just repeat that for the other side. And then once you're done with the legs, just stuff the tail with the polyfill. And then when you sew it together, you're going to sew the brown to the brown down here, and then the white to this white. So you're going to sew it until this part. So in between 1, 2, 3, 4. In between rows 4 and 5, so right on top of row 4 is where you're going to sew the tail, the white part of the tail, and you're just going to sew the brown with the brown part, and sew the white with the white part. And then once you're all done with that, we are going to add the stripes and the arrows. Now I'm adding the arrow, and I like to stretch these parts out more than it naturally is. And when you sew it, make sure you have the same amount of stitches in between the arrow and the horn. So I have 3 stitches here, and so I'm going to make sure I'm going to have 3 stitches over here and make sure it's on the same row. And then you want this one to be directly in the middle, so right here. And then up here, when it comes to this part, you want to make sure that you are covering this part. and that it's centered perfectly. So you'd want to be more on one side or the other side. And I typically just stretch this out. And then these stripes aren't as long as the entire appa body. If you want to make it longer, that's up to you. I just like to stretch it out to the tail, so I connect it where the brown and white meet. Connect it there, and then sew it all across. And I also sew it this way, and I also sew it right here and here and here, obviously here as well, and sew all the sides down too. And then once you have that down, you're gonna get your 6 of these bigger ones and place it here in the center of each leg. Then for the ones that are the smaller stripes, I like to skip 1 row on the tail, go into rows 2 and 3 on the tail, and that's where this stripe will cover it. Skip 3 rows and then put the other stripe here, and then obviously you're going to put the exact same on this side too.